Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
My name is Jim. I'm an alcoholic. Hey, Jim. It's an honor and a privilege and a hell of an inconvenience to be here. But I want to thank Rustum for inviting me anyway. I saw the newcomers that raised their hands. Welcome to the newcomers who raised their hands and the newcomers who didn't raise their hands. I hope if you're here, if you're brand new, I hope you're desperate, because then you'll be willing to do what you have to do to stay sober. I'm going to get right into it because with all the birthdays, I've got about 35 minutes to talk, and I can tell you everything I know about my own story and AA in 35 minutes. First time I got drunk, I was about 13 years old. I was visiting my cousin in town. Town was Sioux City, Iowa. Not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. I lived on a crappy little 40-acre nothing farm north of Sioux City, Iowa. Patch of yellow clay hills you couldn't raise a damn dust storm on. And it was a terrible place. But I was visiting my cousin in town around Christmas time, and we were eating peanuts and candy and all the good stuff that goes with Christmas, and we found a quart of sloe gin. And I chug-a-lugged a quart of sloe gin and ate a half a pound of Spanish peanuts and stuccoed my cousin's house inside. 25 years later, I was lying on my back in my kitchen in front of the open refrigerator taking a little nap about 2:30 in the morning. I just closed the bar in Ojai, and I'd had a little late dinner about 2 a.m., piece of cold chicken, and I chug-a-lugged a quart of Mogan David wine. And I was lying on my back on the kitchen floor, throwing up straight up in the air, and trying to dodge the wine mist that was drifting down. I like to tell those two stories at breakfast meetings where there are a lot of newcomers. Those are the bookends of my drinking. That's my first and my last drunk. And a whole bunch of drunks happened in between those two, but and a whole bunch of other things happened as well. But I'll make it brief because I know we don't have a lot of time. I went to school like everybody else and hated every minute of it. I ended up going to school for 16 years, and I hated every minute of school. It was boring. The professors were drones. They had nothing interesting to say, pretty much, and I was drunk all the time. And I graduated from high school about 169th in a class of 175 from the bottom. And I was pumping gas in a gas station in Sioux City, Iowa in 1952 when I got polio in an epidemic we had. I spent 105 days in a hospital, walked out of there on crutches and braces, basically unable to walk. Well, naturally, in that kind of condition, what you ought to do is take it easy, but I got a job operating heavy equipment, bulldozers, and in Illinois. And it was a terrible, dumb, stupid thing to do. But I was drunk all the time. By this time, I was drinking a lot of beer, and I was drinking on the job. And I'd be pushing dirt, and my crutches would slip off the tractor, and I'd run over them and grind them up in little pieces. You make some very funny tracks if you're drinking on the job. Well, one day they ordered me to move a bunch of mud out of this farm dam, and it was filling up with silt. And so I went down in this. I didn't like the way the guy used, the tone of voice that he used with me, because I'm a sensitive alcoholic. So I took that tractor and I spun it around on one track in that mud hole until you couldn't see it anymore. That was my last day on that job. And shortly thereafter, the representative from the Iowa Department of Vocational Rehabilitation came to my house and said, we'd like to send you to college. I reacted, you know, with total bafflement because I did so poorly in high school and I had no interest in college. I said, I don't want your charity, thank you very much. I was a little hostile, I might say. And he said, we're not talking about charity, we're talking about making you into a taxpayer. I thought, Jesus, that's an odd thing to say. So, you know, maybe I'll be a taxpayer, maybe I'll be a taxpayer. So I agreed to take their generous offer and I went to college. And I studied political science and I did well and badly. I got alcoholic grades, A's and F's. If the class was at 10 a.m., I could make it. If it was at 8 o'clock class, I couldn't make it because I was sick and hungover from drinking in the bars at night. After 3 years, I was restless, irritable, and discontent, which is how we are a lot of the time when we're not drinking. So the political science professor had told me, you know, McNally, you have a kind of a weird linear way of thinking. You ought to consider studying law. So I went over to Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska to study law after 3 years of college. And for about 6 weeks, I put my act together and stayed out of the bars, studied the case law, briefed the cases, recited the cases, acted like a fledgling lawyer. And I didn't do well. I got, you know, B's and C's in the quiz at the end of 6 weeks. And I didn't realize that most of the people in that law school got bad grades in the first quiz. It was part of the drill. It was part of the process of breaking down your alleged ego so you could be taught something. And but I took it personally, naturally. And I said, they don't recognize talent when they see it. So I went back to the bars, and in less than a year, I drank my way out of that school, literally drank my way out of the school. They didn't even want to see me again. There wasn't any question about readmitting or applying for readmission. So I ended up that fall enrolling in South Dakota University, which was nearer to my hometown and nearer to my lifestyle, which was drinking every night in the bars. In 1961, I got a graduation certificate from the University of South Dakota School of Law and took the Iowa bar and passed it and started practicing in an old firm down in Sioux City. And I'm not going to go into all the details of that, but 6 months after I was at that firm, a friend of mine, Don O'Brien, who had been appointed federal district attorney by John Kennedy, called me and said, how'd you like to be a federal prosecutor? I said, fine, when do I start? I was bored to death with examining abstracts of title to real property. Next to watching corn grow is the dullest job in the world. So I went over and I became a federal prosecutor, and I had U.S. Justice Department credentials and all that crap. And the only thing that changed about my life is that I was drinking in better bars. Now I was making more money. And I was drinking in some of these bars with the fancy upholstered carpeted step, you know, in front of the bar, and the nice upholstered stools, so that when you fall out of the bar stool at 2 a.m., you don't hurt yourself on that brass rail that exists in some of the old beer bars that I used to go to. That's the only thing that changed about my life. Well, after a couple of years there, John Kennedy got assassinated. The Democratic Party was in shambles. The government was changing over. And so I left the federal government in 64, got married in June of 64, changing over. And so I left the federal government in 64, got married in June of 64, ran for the state legislature in 64, state senate. If you drink a lot, you'll get ideas like that. I was drinking a lot, and so I got on the ballot and I started campaigning in the bars as God intended. I'll tell you, the friendly people who are in the bars are not out there on the street if you're a Democrat in a Republican district, as I was. And you know, you go out there and they shut the door in your face 15 or 20 times in a row, you get the idea that maybe this is not your district. But anyway, I worked real hard trying to campaign and present my position to the people of that district. And it wouldn't have mattered a damn bit if I'd stayed home, because it was 1964, and many of you are not old enough to actually remember, but Lyndon Johnson was running at the top of the Democratic ticket, and Barry Goldwater was running at the top of the Republican ticket. And Lyndon Johnson won by a huge landslide. carrying himself and a lot of other incompetents into office, including me. And I woke up the day after the election and sick and hungover as usual, and looked at the paper, and sure enough, I'd been elected to the state senate. Now, what do you do? I got my wife convinced that we should move down to Des Moines and actually serve in the legislature. So we went down there, and I found a headquarters company in the Savory Hotel downtown in Des Moines, and I started drinking there every night. It was a perfect job, I thought, for an alcoholic. I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I knew I was a heavy drinker. But you know, the lobbyists will buy you anything your little heart desires, including all the booze you can possibly drink. Well, I drank in the bars down there, and I served in the legislature for one term, and then I got paranoid. My alcoholic paranoia caught up with me, and I knew they were going to find out about me, which was, there wasn't anything to find out except that I was drunk in the Savory Hotel bar at night. And in those days, that wouldn't, nobody would call that a defect of character. They'd say that was an attribute. And so, but I didn't run for the second term. I became a lobbyist, and that's even a better job for a drunk because you get paid for partying. I was well paid, I had a good expense account, and it was all on the tab of my employer. All the booze, anything I needed to have to wine and dine the members of the legislature was on their tab. So I partied day and night. And I'd still be doing that job, except that I started having a few little odd things that began to happen to me. Like I could see little things moving out of the corner of my eye, and you would turn real fast and they're always gone. You never... Some people call those visual hallucinations. And I was losing track of a whole bunch of things, days at a time where I was blacked out and I couldn't remember. People would say, you know, remember the night we went down to this place and did this and that? And I go, yeah, sure, I remember that. But I didn't remember. I was drawing blanks. And so, and also my metabolism was all screwed up. My idea of dinner was a pepperoni and a hard-boiled egg out of one of those filthy bottles on the bar, you know. That was dinner for me. And so the local doctors, I was having serious problems. And the local doctors didn't know quite what to make of me. They didn't ask me the questions, you know, like, you know, how much do you drink? They sent me to Rochester, Minnesota, to the Mayo Clinic. I spent 3 days up there, and they looked in every aperture of my body and asked me a lot of dumb questions. And the dumbest question was, do you drink a lot? And the dumber answer was, I have an occasional social drink. They weren't hip enough to ask the obvious cross-examination questions. How close together are those occasions? And how big is the drink on each occasion? They didn't ask those questions. They just wrote it down, you know, occasional social drink. So after 3 days, I said, what do you think is wrong with me, Doc? And the doctor looked at me sternly and he said, we think you have executive stress syndrome. I like the sound of that because there wasn't anything in there about booze. There wasn't anything in there about slow down or cut back on booze. So I went back to Des Moines. Oh, I said, what do you do about executive stress syndrome? And they said, well, we have these blue tablets, 10 milligram Valium. So I went back to Des Moines and I drank whiskey and ate the Valium by the handfuls, and I got very serene. Some days I was so serene I couldn't hit my ass with either hand. And it was a very, very bad time, a very, very bad time. But it got a little worse. I was, my wife, and by this time, 3-year-old daughter and I were traveling on the freeway from Omaha to Des Moines in a station wagon, and a lady rear-ended us doing about 95 miles an hour and booted us off a high embankment, rolled us over 6 or 7 times. And my wife was thrown out on the freeway that day and killed. And my daughter, my 3-year-old daughter, and I were rolled up in a ball in the bottom of the creek bed on fire. And we got out of the car, and I had a broken shoulder and some broken ribs. My daughter was not hurt. But we were in the hospital for 6 or 7 days. And when I got out of that hospital, I did the only thing I knew how to do with any horrible thing in my life. I got drunk. And I stayed drunk for 30 or 60 days. I'm not sure which, because I wasn't counting. And one day I drank myself, quote, sober. I wasn't really sober, but I was free of alcohol for a few hours. And then I had another one of those, you have to be very wary of having these insights, keen alcoholic insights, I call them. I figured out that every problem I'd had in my life had occurred in Iowa. And the answer is obvious. The answer to that is just obvious. Get out of Iowa. So I got my elderly mother convinced that we ought to move out here to California. And so we moved up to Ojai, California, near Ventura. And I found the Firebird Tavern up there, which was a roadhouse kind of place, dark, dingy, velour drapes with tattered holes in them and a lot of cigarette burns on the carpet. Smells like urine and beer, my kind of place. And so I spent 3 years there drinking booze in that Firebird. I got licensed out here to practice law. I started practicing in an old frame house down in Ventura, doing criminal defense work. And I was afraid to drive up the freeway home from Ventura because the CHP and the local police and the sheriff's department, they knew I was a drunk. And they would have loved to catch me driving with a 2.6 blood alcohol, which is where I like to drive. And they would have loved to paint my automobile on the side of their fuselage, as they used to do in the war. But so I'd go into my office in Ventura and sleep under the desk. I'd crawl under this old conference table I had and sleep there, fully clothed, suit and tie, and drunk. And I did that many, 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 many times to avoid driving up that freeway. And one morning I crawled out from under that desk and looked at the Ventura paper, and there was a story in there about the Sarah Retreat House in Malibu, which had burned down in a fire in 1970. It was being rebuilt. And they had a number. They said you could do these retreats on weekends. And I was willing to do anything. I was desperate to find out what was wrong with me. I knew there was something desperately wrong with me, and I couldn't tell you what it was. So I called this number, and the lady said, yeah, we're having these retreats, and we're having one this weekend, you should know. But it's for alcoholics this weekend. And there was a long silence on my end of the phone, and I said, I'm not an alcoholic, but I'll come anyway. So I went. And I didn't see any alcoholics. There were 25 or 30 guys down there, sober and clean, clear of eye, steady of hand, as Jim Ryan used to say. And they didn't look like they were alcoholics, because I knew a lot of alcoholics. I represented a lot of alcoholics, and they were cutting on each other, shooting each other, driving over each other, getting drunk in court. They were doing all the stuff that we do, And these guys didn't look like that. But they welcomed me to the meetings, and I sat through some of their sessions, and on Saturday night they had an AA meeting. They said, you'd be welcome to come to this AA meeting. I thought, oh God, we're going to sit around and talk about biblical war, and ultimately we'll throw a nickel on the drum and save another drunken bum. That kind of thing to sing about. And but I went, and it was a big revelation. These guys are talking. They're sharing about fear. Grown men sharing about fear. Now, the guys that I ran around with never even admitted they'd ever been afraid of anything. We were all, in the bars, we were all brain surgeons, combat pilots, Silver Star winners. There were no fearful men in the bars. But these guys were talking about the truth. They were sharing about blackouts, geographical cures for alcoholism, going from one state to the next to avoid yourself, and bringing yourself with you, and all that stuff. And I thought they were reading my mail. So when it came my turn, I said, my name is Jim, I'm an alcoholic. I didn't believe it, but I was a criminal defense lawyer. I said a lot of things I didn't believe. One of them said, I think you're going to do some more drinking, but we have screwed it up so you won't enjoy it anymore. The other guy said, if you want to be sober, we suggest you go back to Ventura, get a hold of somebody in AA, and go to the meeting. So I went back to Ventura, got drunk, got sick again, called a guy named Bud G, who said to me, I think you ought to go to the meeting today at the Norman and Cooper Manor in Oxnard. So I said, God, today it seems a little soon, don't you think? He said, no, I think you better go today. So I went today, and it was a nightmare. It was, you know, I was a big shot by my own estimation. And I had a three-piece suit, right? And a Cadillac. I went over to the Norman Cooper Manor, which is a Korsakoff syndrome place to die. It's a low-bottom drying out place. They didn't have any of these fancy drying out places in those days. This was 1971. And so I went to this place, and there were 12 or 13 old guys, older than I am now, which is pretty old, sitting around a scarred table and a bare fly-speck light bulb hanging down in the middle of the room. And they're all in their purple terry cloth robes and rubber shoes. And the head leper is reading from this blue book. And he is saying, if you want what we have. Oh my God. I said to myself, I was not honest enough to say anything to them. I said, if I don't get out of here in a minute, I may get what he has. I went back to Bud and I said, Bud, these are genetic misfits. They're not rowing with all their oars in the water. And Bud said, and he wasn't intending it to be directive, he was intending it to be an insult, but I was too sick to be insulted. He said, they have meetings for big shots in Beverly Hills. Many of you are not sober long enough to remember the old Rodeo Drive group over on Rodeo Drive. And, I don't know how long this meeting has been here in this place, but it was the meeting that he directed me to was on Rodeo Drive, and it's this same group. So I drove all the way from Ojai to Beverly Hills to go to the Rodeo Drive group because, you know, that's where the big shots went. And I passed maybe 100 perfectly good AA meetings to get down here. And, the third meeting I was there was September 10, 1971. There was a gorgeous woman up here giving a 10-minute talk, and I decided that I wanted what she had and would go to any length to get it. So after the meeting, I invited her out. We went out after the meeting, and her 10-year-old daughter was with her. We had a wonderful time. We started talking and dating, and 87 days later, we got married. This December 3rd, we'll be married 33 years. People had said to us, it's not a good idea to get emotionally involved in the first year of your recovery, but I didn't have to worry about that. I wasn't in the first year of my recovery. I was still drinking. Then we moved up to Ojai with her 2 kids. I had this little girl who was 6. We put those kids together, and it wasn't a good fit. But I was still drinking and not working any steps at all, not even the first step. And I got to the point, I'll make this fairly short, I got to the point where after 7 months of drinking and going to meetings, I came to the conclusion, and it wasn't based on just a lot of airy-fairy nonsense. I was pretty well convinced from my own history that I came to the conclusion, and it wasn't based on just a lot of airy-fairy nonsense. I was pretty well convinced from my own history that I was never, ever going to be sober. This might work for you, but it wasn't going to work for me. My case is different. I'm really basically a brooding genius and a kind of a borderline mystic. And an egomaniac. And I came to the belief that I was never, ever going to be sober, and so why not just kick back, enjoy the ride, and drink until you absolutely can't drink anymore. Well, I went into the Firebird one night in Ojai, had a bottle of Coors. I could still see the sweat running down the side of that bottle. And half of another bottle. Pushed the second half of the second bottle back in the bar and walked out of the place. Never to have another drink of alcohol to this day. To this day. And last Tuesday, that was 32 years. That's a miracle. Because I didn't go to that bar with the idea that was going to be my last drink. I had no intention of that being my last drink of alcohol. But what happened was, the power greater than myself, I'll tell you a little bit about that before I close, removed from me the obsession to drink alcohol. It's that simple. And I don't have any other good explanation. Believe me, I've searched high and low for other explanations. It was that simple. Because I had tried a whole bunch of things, including psychiatry, religion, a lot of different things to cut back on my drinking, and I never had any success at all. Well, my life got perfect after that, and we lived happily ever after. Not quite true. Lying is about the last thing to go. I was real sick from drinking alcohol. I'd walked around with a headache and diarrhea for 25 years. And you know, you can get used to walking around with a headache and diarrhea for 25 years. And I was real nervous because the people that I fell in among, the sober alcoholics that I fell in among, were real purists in AA. They said, we don't take any of those funny pills either that make you feel just right, you know, so you can tolerate the planet. We don't take those. We don't take anything that affects our moods or our minds. I go, okay, and I threw away my Valium pills. And then I got real nervous because I was real nervous. In fact, I used to hyperventilate. I had these anxiety attacks to the point where I'd end up in the emergency room. I couldn't breathe. And that happened a lot. And it happened for 2.5 years after I had my last drink of alcohol. So I know what it's like to get real sick from drinking booze. And, but I didn't use and I didn't drink. And thank God. But I had a guy appointed himself my sponsor, David H. David was a 220-pound prize fighter. And he fought Ezra Charles. You may not remember Ezra Charles, but he was a tough guy. And David came by one day and said, I'm your new sponsor. I said, okay. I wasn't going to disagree with him. And then he would say to me, how's your program working? I'd be drinking and coming back, and drinking and coming back. Fine, fine. And then he'd say, notify your face. He was a hard-nosed guy. And, but I went through the steps with David, and that's the important part of the story. David's drunk today. He got drunk after 26 years of sobriety. And he got drunk because he quit doing the things that kept him sober. That's as simple as I can make it. But he's a wonderful guy. I grieve all the time that he's not sober. He's been out there for 7 or 8 years. But I went through the steps with David, and I started working with other alcoholics. I started talking in the program, and life got pretty good. I'm going to wind this up. Mary and I were at odds with each other, and that started to straighten out, and life got pretty good. We were real active in the program for 10 years. And then I got looking around the courtroom one day, and I decided that the guy up there on the bench seemed to be the guy that was working the least of anybody in the courtroom. So naturally I wanted that job. So I applied to the governor's office to be appointed to the Superior Court in Ventura County. And they sent me a big questionnaire with 33 questions, and you had to be very detailed in every aspect of it. One of the questions was, is there anything about your life that the governor should know in considering you for appointment? I put down there, I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous for 10 years. I don't share that at the public level, and I hope the governor won't either. I was kind of flippant, but I had no expectation that I was going to get the job anyway. You know, are they going to put a dried out drunk on that bench? Well, it never occurred to me there were some wet ones on that bench. So they sent a commission. They sent a commission down to interview me, and one of the questions they asked me was, how can we be sure that you won't show up drunk some Monday morning if you're appointed to the court? And I said, I can't promise you that I won't. Because when I was promising people that I wouldn't, I was showing up drunk. And I can't promise you a damn thing because I don't have anything to promise. But if I continue to do what I've been doing for the last 10 years, there's a reasonable chance that I won't show up drunk. That seemed to satisfy them because I was appointed in 1982 and served on the Superior Court up there for 12.5 years and retired in 95. But, and that was a hard but good, marvelous experience for me. I'll share a couple of quick stories with you and then I'll quit. I was leading a meeting up in Ojai one time, and my job was to sign the court cards after the meeting. A guy came up after the meeting to get his court card signed, and he was red from the collar clear to the top of his head. He was pissed. He did not want to be there. He didn't want to be anywhere near the AA meeting. So I said to him, to lighten him up a little bit, "Did you get a little nudge from the judge?" And he said, "Yeah, you son of a bitch, you were the one that said it." So I said, "I'll recognize the signature on this card when you bring it in on Monday." But I spent 6 years in dependency court dealing with abused children. And it turns out that 85% at least of the people who are abusing their children are alcoholics or addicts or both. And I had a chance to send an awful lot of people to Alcoholics Anonymous. And often when I speak around Ventura County or Santa Barbara, I run into people whose kids I took away from them and gave them back when they got sober. And it's a wonderful opportunity to practice the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous in all of our affairs. I've sent people to AA, NA, CA, GA, and I even sent a woman to Al-Anon one night. She was making the run for this poor guy and buying a gallon of wine for him, and he was dying of alcoholism. She couldn't stop herself, so I helped her stop. But, you know, I'm sober now, 32 years. Mary and I are getting along better than we have ever gotten along in our lives. We've got 6 grandchildren. They're all doing well, and none of them are alcoholics or addicts, thank God at this point. And, you know, if they become alcoholics or addicts, they'll know where to go. And we will be able to carry the message to them if it ever happens that way. But our lives have been better and better and better all the time. I just want to close with one thought, and that is, it was absolutely necessary for me to take the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in the order that they're written, and to do them as faithfully as I could. I still do 10, 11, and 12, but I had to go through all 12 steps, and as a result, the result of taking those steps, I've had a spiritual awakening. I hasten to add that it was not Bill Wilson hot shot, hot flash, or whatever you want to call it, where it was a sudden illuminating experience. It was a very slow educational variety of experience that is referred to in Appendix 2 of the Big Book. I'd like to have had a hot shot, illuminating experience where my life was suddenly changed, but it hasn't worked that way for me. It's been very, very, very slow. And I found a higher power as a result of taking those steps. I had a higher power all my life, but he was an angry old white guy in the sky that would drop you into a pool of everlasting fire for the slightest damned infraction. It's pretty hard to turn your will and your life over to somebody like that. I mean, I wasn't willing to do that. But I have this new higher power that I describe simply as the healing power of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's not very specific, but it's good enough for me today. It may change tomorrow, I hope it does. But that is my higher power today, and I'd like to close by inviting the blessing of that higher power on all of us tonight. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.